Let me call to order the Mount Pleasant Town Council special meeting for Friday, September 25th. It's good to see everybody this morning. Thank you all for being here. It looks a little dark. It's almost like an evening meeting, isn't it? We have our agenda before you. Item 1 was called to order. Item 2 is public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, you know where to come. Name and address, and 2 minutes, please. Is there anyone here to make a public comment? Public comment time.
I wonder what he's going to say.
I hate not to take advantage of opportunities like this. My name is Michael German. I live at 1707 Snoud Road. I'm your neighbor in the settlement community of Snoud. I'm not in the town of Mount Pleasant. That's one of the 2 reasons why I'm here. Again, asking you to reconsider the conditions that you're putting my community in with the sewer connection. That's been matter of fact, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of coming here and saying the same thing over again. But that's why I'm here. Don't understand why decisions like that's been made. And to let you know once again, based on what your city administrator has said, we're not freeloaders. Your town administrator, we're not freeloaders. We don't want anything for nothing. And I read that article again. What I found to be interesting in that, you interviewed somebody in my community that's in the town of Mount Pleasant. Snoud probably consists now of about maybe 350 homes. Of 350 homes, 25 years later, maybe 50 has joined the town. But what was interested in what was said was, I joined the town of Mount Pleasant because I did the math, it went on. But what you missed, he said, I am a member of the Snoud Civic Association. He's in the town, but he's still a member. He's still one of us. We recognized him. We made him a part of our organization. That was really powerful. I wish you would consider doing the same thing. We can discuss all these things day in and day after. But unless we're part of the solution, we're there at the table, nothing's going to happen. And since 1936, when the town was first started, I wasn't there. Today, 2020, looks the same. Again, I said this before. Why are you afraid to talk to me? Why are you afraid to talk with us? Don't make the decision and bring us to the table. I don't know where I'm at in the 2 minutes, but I want to say this, even about Highway 41. You made all the decisions. Mount Pleasant made the decision, turned it over to Charleston County. And the people who were involved were not even invited to the table. You told them what they can do or what you're going to do. Now you tell us why we shouldn't. My 2 minutes is up. Anyway, thank you very much. That's why I'm here. I'm sick and tired of being here, and I'll be back again until we get some sort of resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. German. Anyone else for public comments? Nope. All right. Let's move to item 3, our reason for being here today, action to establish a millage rate and sales tax credit factor for the town of Mount Pleasant.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Every year, the town council is required to establish and certify to Charleston County the town's millage rate and local option sales tax credit factor. Once the town's property appraisals and assessments are received in September. There is, this year's a little different because we have a reassessment year. So, property is reassessed every 5 years. The last reassessment was tax year 2015, and this one is considered tax year 2020. State law requires that the millage rate be rolled back for reassessed properties to a rate that generates the same revenue as the prior year. New construction and growth are not factored in there, so you are allowed your new construction and growth, but for reassessed properties, it needs to be revenue neutral. The state also limits the percentage that the millage rate can increase. The amount of increase is predicated on population growth and the consumer price index. So for this year, they allowed the town to increase their millage by 3.83% or 1.3 mils over the rollback rate. The state also allows for any unused mills from the prior 3 years. You're allowed to bank those. So each year, the oldest drops off and you get a new bank. The town of Mount Pleasant has 6 mills in its millage bank. So therefore, the town can take the rollback rate, which only applies to operating, and increase it to a total of 7.3 mils. The rollback rate and millage increase limitations are placed on the operating millage only. The debt millage is allowed to be increased to cover the cost of debt service in any year, so there are no limitations on your debt millage. So tax year 2020, it's based on the property values as of December 31st, 2018, and then any new growth in 2019, plus any property that has changed hands. It now goes up to its current value based on the sales. In Charleston County, the county as a whole, in 2015, the last tax year of reassessment, the median price of a residence was $270,000. For tax year 2020, the median price of a residence is $326,300. So the median sales price in the county of Charleston increased 21%. For the town, property values increased 10.3%, and new growth was 2.9%. So that gives us a total of increase of 13.2% above last tax year. The increase, and that's the increase on our appraised values. So when you then apply the 2% for residential, or 6% for 4% for residential, or 6% for non-residential, our assessed value grew 12.8%. Of this assessed value, the split between 4% properties and 6% properties remain very similar. It's 56% is 4% properties, and non-residential 6% makes up 44% of our assessed value. So included in this reassessment data is another state limitation. For properties that have not transferred since the last reassessment, the reassessment change in your property value is capped. So we're looking at what was in 2013 to what is in 2018. So an Act 388 of 2006 established a statewide 15% cap on assessment increases. So here's what that cap looks like. If you have two homes and they're both valued at $490,000, one of them increases 17%, it now is at $573,000 and it generates $702. If the same assessed house increased 27%, you can see the $622. What the state says is you are capped at 15%. So both homes then have a new value in our tax rolls at $563,500. So if you get your reassessment notices, which have recently gone out, you may see that it also talks about this 15% cap. And then per the county, the town's updated average capped residential property is valued at $493,065.
Give that again, 490 what?
Oh, $493 and then $65.
493,065.
Yes, sir.
That's the average amount?
The average capped residential. So if it went higher, it would have brought it down and then averaged that new amount in is $493. Yes, sir. So what does all this mean? Okay. Of the increase in appraised value, real property increased 13.8% and personal property increased 7.7%. That kind of collectively makes what increased. Our current operating millage is 38.1 and our current debt is 2.9. So we always talk about the 41 mils. That's the breakdown. Again, the reassessment only applies to operating, as debt millage is allowed to increase to whatever your debt service needs are. So the county has said to the town, your operating mills, less growth and new construction, need to be rolled back to 34.7 mils to generate the same amount of revenue. The debt mills is not part of it. Our new millage would be 37.6. What that would generate is $39 million in projected revenue. So, just as we go through this kind of flow chart, if we said, but wait a minute, we know we have 7.3 mils, if you take 6 in our bank and the 1.3 allowed this year, we only want to use a portion of them, and we just want to maintain our current rate. That would be maintaining 41 mils and would generate 42.7 million. But we said, whoa, you know what? We have 7.3 mils. Now, as the CFO, I love this. We have 7.3 mils. Let's just go for them all. That would be another 3.9 increase, and that would generate 46.7 million. The other piece that we have to establish, so 2 things we're looking for you today. What would you like the certified millage rates to be? And also, what is the rate of our local option sales tax credit factor? So the town has an additional 1% in the sales tax. We get a portion of that back that we maintain, but a larger portion of that we get back, we need to take those numbers that you just saw and we need to reduce it and give it back to our taxpayers. So what we need to do is we have to estimate what do we think our sales tax that we need to give back is going to be this year. Right now, we're looking at very conservative 6.2 million. We just got July's numbers in. They are below last year, but better than expected. So saying
6.2 million is the total revenue from our 1% local sales tax?
that we give back, it's roughly 71%. There's a formula, and then there's a portion that we keep.
Right.
So we keep what it is, but they require us to give this 71% portion of that 1% based on population and everything else. We have to give that back. So we need to reduce all the tax bills by an amount that will give back to our taxpayers 6.2 million. We believe that it's going to be 0.00028. Now, if we get this wrong, if things improve better than expected, and we receive more than 6.2 million, I book it as a liability, and next year you'll see that tax credit go up so we can reduce those. Ultimately, I have to track it, and we have to give whatever comes back of that 71% back to our taxpayers through their tax bill. So we're looking at leaving here with an established millage rates and the loss tax factor credit.
Easy to understand. Yes, you probably have some questions. You have the floor, Ms. Whitley.
Ms. Kotok, it is my understanding that we currently take some of our operating expenses and use those for debt service. Approximately how much do we take out of operating and push to our debt service?
So our debt service is supported in 2 ways, 3 ways. The debt millage, 2.9, goes to support our debt service. We also use special revenues. So if the debt was, when we widened 17 and we borrowed that, some of our transportation money helped. So we have special revenues that support it, but we do have a lot of general fund. So between the two, it's about $3 million that is supported just to cover our current 3 GO bonds.
So we currently take $3 million out of our operating expenses and move that over to our debt service.
Of the 3 million, it's broken down 2.1 million general fund and 900,000 special revenues.
Okay. And we are allowed to increase our debt millage. So I guess as you're the accountant, does it make sense? Should we not be moving our operating money into our debt service? Wouldn't it be better to have a debt?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay.
Answer that, please.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Our
Yeah.
debt millage, the reason that the state allows us to increase it is to cover our costs. The way they kind of frame it is they control how much our debt is in total, the 8% cap, unless you do a referendum. So therefore, by the nature of allowing us to change the debt, it is intended to cover the debt service cost. Yes, ma'am.
So if we have a 2.9 debt millage currently, what would the debt millage need to be to fully cover our debt and leave operating alone?
I think Mr. Demore has some of that.
Oh, he
on
does.
his
Okay,
slide.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go to the next.
Yes, sir.
On the next slide here, you'll see different options. One option that's not included, Ms. Whitley, is to do exactly what you're saying. Meaning if we took all the money that is currently supporting service on debt, moved it to debt millage, that number would come out more than the 41 rate that you have right now. So a lot of this can be sliced and diced in different ways. The purpose of this slide, if it's okay with you, maybe allow me to move through it and talk about some of these things because it's included here. But let me review this real quick. You'll see the very top line is prior to the reassessment, and you'll see in the far right column is the 0.041, which was the millage rate, and that's 41 cents for every $1,000 in value, is what that stands for. And then we have the second line, which is the base, which is after reassessment, the requirement to move it back to revenue neutral, which brings us down in total, far right column, 0.0376. And that's an option, and here come 5 other options underneath that. Again, these can be sliced and diced in different ways. We put these together just for purpose of example and discussion. So that third line, where it says base and CPI and population, that's 3.83%. That's for 1 year. That's 1 year that you're allowed to increase taxation. It's an additional 1.3 mils. It's reflected on the operating millage side, which is that operating millage column. And if you extend it out, it's 0.0390 total millage. Another way to slice it is the base, the partial millage bank, not all of it, which generates 3.32, and you see it extended to the far right at 0.0409. That is also underneath what the 0.041 was. And then the final two at the bottom, which gets to the debt millage situation that you were describing. And the second from the bottom is the debt mills to support debt, taking some, adding it to the debt millage side in order to free up some of the side on the operating is 2.4 mils. That also includes 1 mil. And the reason why that's there, again, it could be arranged any way you like it. The reason why that's there is because the net value of an increase in millage to us is $800,000.
And that's under the current assessment value, right? Will that go up? Will 1 mil bring in more at the new? That's a question I've had since we started this conversation.
Yes.
Or will it still only bring in 8?
They are different numbers.
Okay.
Based on the value. You're correct, sir.
Okay.
You're thinking about it. But the net, once everything is taken out and the actual value, actual amount of money that you have to put towards something, after the reassessment is about $800,000.
Will still be 8? Okay,
Yep.
that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yep. So, for example, let's just say your council was inclined to maybe take on one of the drainage projects in the old village. The number one worst, or the worst one, was the Royal Avenue Basin. You know about that. And the cost of that is roughly $6.5 million. We're getting some help from DOT, which brings it down about $500,000. So you're in the $6 million range to do that project. Never know for sure, although we get cost estimates until it's bid and priced by a contractor. But if your net mill is $800,000, and let's say you bonded it over 10 years, that's going to get you that project, that Royal Avenue project. Maybe with a little bit of luck, there'll be some spillover that can help with the Edwards Park Basin as well. So that's why that mill, in that second from the last line, debt mills to support debt and 1 mil, is 2.4. If you extend that out, that takes you just below what was the prior millage assessment. Prior millage was 0.041. That comes out to 0.040. So overall, the millage rate had gone down. And then the last one is just a little more of that. It's a little more capturing or freeing up operating side of the budget. You're capturing it on the debt millage side to pay the service on the debt. And that one comes out to really just barely under what the millage was prior to assessment. So, if yourself and members of council, mayor, you all were so inclined to perhaps go for one of those projects in the old village and free up or make the debt millage side pay for as much of debt service as possible, that second to the last option is an option I would recommend if you were so inclined.
Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke.
Just curious, you mentioned a 10-year bond. My thought is with the interest rates where they are, is there any discussion about stretching that so that we could do more? I think a lot of government finance is cash flow, quite frankly. And when we are in such a great position with Moody's and Standard & Poor's and whoever judges us, to have the rates we'll get, I just don't know if it would be better for us to take on more at that rate and just stretch it out a little bit longer on the payment. So that's just a philosophy, I guess.
It's certainly an option. We are capped by our 8% limit with the state. We will have more of space. We'll have more space now.
Yes.
Because the values in the community have gone up.
Right.
And by the way, fun fact, values in the community have exceeded $1 billion for the first time. But yes, sir, it could be, you could move it to 20 years. We could go as far as we could that you felt most comfortable, stretching our ability to borrow, or some variation beyond 10, beyond 8 million, up to that limit.
The reason I asked that is, I know today's meeting is not a budget meeting, but when the budget meeting comes around, I can assure you, you could give us a list longer than we can even dream about of things that actually are needed. And I'm just trying to figure out how we may be able to work ourselves down to that a little bit more with the same amount of money, with the same agreement that we come up with today. That's all. And the reason I asked the question was I didn't know if you were locked into that or that's up for discussion later as well.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Marcy. Y'all did a great job. Before any of you guys were on council years ago, we passed the Mount Pleasant Growth Management Plan. And I had to go dig it out. I gave everybody a copy to take a look at it. And we had some goals there, and we've achieved a lot of those goals already. One was to amend the Mount Pleasant zoning code to eliminate all bonus density allowances. In other words, the developers, if we gave an extra curb cut, they would, give us, more affordable homes or affordable apartments. One was to amend the town of Mount Pleasant's zoning code to eliminate increased densities in mixed use and planned developments. Increase impact fees for transportation, we've done that. But goal 3 of this is about recreation mostly, open space and recreation. And we've been kind of woefully behind, the 8 ball on that one. We have facilities that really need repair. Our Park West pool is in bad shape and really needs repair. I mean, we have fathers having to bring their daughters to the men's locker room to get to the pool, and vice versa on the other side, women having to bring their sons to the women's locker room. We need to do some things with the recreation as well. So, I heard him talk about the flooding in the old village. Absolutely, we know that's a problem, but I think we need to really look at everything and make sure that we, check off all the boxes. All we've got is like one more box to check on this document that we passed years ago. And it has to do with recreation, and we've got land we can't even develop, and we'll probably all be deceased and gone before we can get to doing Rifle Range Road. But there are some things that we can do, I think, that will help the public, that will help our citizens, and at least do what we said we were going to do when we pass this growth management plan.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Given that this is a very interesting time that we're in as well as we move forward. I think that I appreciate what Gary says, and I'm on the rec department, rec committee, and I think that that's a really important part of things. But I think, at this point in time, for what this rate is, I think that we need to stay focused on the absolute must-have, sort of like the stormwater, the drainage, those sorts of things. And I think that at this time, we could also, lower the overall millage rate to 0.04. And so, and then also work on a referendum for the recreation department, because then we could have this taxation with the sunset provision, work through that over the next year so that it's on the ballot for November, and let our citizens themselves decide to self-impose a tax with a sunset provision that could fund Rifle Range Park in our lifetimes, that could finish out, all the different sort of recreation projects that we have in the town. So with that, I would like to move that we approve the second to last option there with a lowered overall millage rate of 0.04.
Hang on a second.
Second.
Okay. Is that the one that says debt mills to support debt?
Yes, because I think that it's also important to move some of move that debt millage over to where it belongs and stop taking money out of operations as much as possible.
Let me ask our parliamentarian. I don't think the motion should say the next to the last option on here, so I'm trying to word the motion right. I know exactly what
Okay,
you're saying.
I would like to move to lower the total millage rate to 0.04 with an operating millage of 0.0347 and a debt millage of 0.0053.
All right, so the op is 0.0347. And debt 0.0053. Okay, and we have a second from Mr. O'Rourke. Okay, so we're in discussion. Mr. Chapman.
Yes, sir. And I think I'm hearing that what that option does is gets us started with the Royal Avenue drainage. If we go and bond it, it also takes not all, but a good bit of the millage, debt millage that's in the operating account and shifts it over to capital. And I would like to expand on that a little bit if I could on the drainage aspect. And again, we're not in a budget meeting. We're looking at mills. As Mr. DeMoore mentioned, we've got the 1.2 mil and 1.2 million back from DOT. We also have 2 options going out for requests, if you will, from FEMA. And I realize we didn't get the last FEMA grant, but maybe we learned a little bit from that and can do a little better. And I volunteer to stay on our congressional delegation to help us, because I think they can. And I think most grants that go to FEMA have a little bit of political wizardry, if you want to call it that, to help the community. So I want to pledge to do that. And so, and I know, Mr. O'Rourke, you were talking about going out 20 years for debt service, but we've got some things that potentially, within the 10 years, could help us get the second drainage area and maybe do some more. But I'd also like to suggest that we go out and look at how to do a tiered approach for stormwater fees. And Mayor, I know you have talked about the importance of trying to recognize what houses are smaller houses and have the least amount of impervious service, and trying to better equate the value of that impervious surface. And I would like to recommend, and I know, again, we're not in budget, but to our administrator, to start the process of looking at that, whether that is, consultant, whatever it is. But I think that will also help us. It will also recognize that maybe some of the lower income people are paying too much. And they would get won't get a rollback as much as we would like to give them, but they will get a lesser amount on their stormwater fees. And those people who have, let's just say, over $500,000 house with a lot of impervious surface on their property might have to pay a little more. So I would like to also, as we look at this debt millage and the motion that we have, to also encourage the administrator to get that study underway so that can also help people who might not feel they're getting a full rollback in the millage.
Are you raising your hand? Yes.
I was just going to say, even though it wasn't a motion, I second what you just said. I think that's, there's merit in all of that, and without, I know I'm not Marcy, but if we do vote for what we just said, I believe that there'll be money in there to do what you just said, and even some of the things, Mr. Santos, that you mentioned about the pool, you know, some of the things that we had to take off, like the pool was one thing, for example. So I'm not speaking for you, but if we were able to pass this, there are some things that we will be able to do.
Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
So it's clear I'm in the minority here, but we are in the middle of a pandemic that has also created an economic crisis for many of our people. I can tell you firsthand that businesses are hurting. People are hurting. So for us to even consider raising somebody's taxes is at best tone deaf. And I cannot support any of this. I mean, to me, this should have been a 5-minute meeting. We come in here, we lower the millage rate down to so where it's revenue neutral, and we leave. I mean, we are in the middle of horrible times, and the idea of somebody getting a higher tax bill right now than they got last year, it's not right.
Have we done a calculation on what this would look like? We have a number, maybe we can do this right here, what the average house in Mount Pleasant is, right?
So I
And
did,
if this passes and their total millage is now 0.04, we have lowered the tax rate. And what would account for a higher tax bill is the appreciation of their property, right?
yes, sir. So we ran it not just with the assessed value. I didn't do the 493. I did 450. I did anywhere from 250 to $1 million kind of range. And we also put in our recommendation for the tax credit factor. So if you had a $450,000 house, it's appraised at, it would be assessed at 4%. And if you applied the 40 mills as opposed to 41 mills, your tax bill would be $594 for the town, $594. What that equates to is for each mill on a $450,000 house, it's $18 additional dollars is what it turns out to be as we did that.
Could you repeat that number again?
Yes, sir.
I think I heard 18, but I want to make sure.
Yes, sir. So
$18
for each
for a whole
mill-
year.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
This is a $450,000 house?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hang
Hang on a second. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out, let's say you had a $450,000 house before this assessment. Yeah. That's what, I'm trying to figure out the difference
Oh, yeah,
between
I
what
can do
you
that
were
right now. I'm doing
paying
it right now. Here we
and
go.
what you will be paying now. That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is that increase? We're lowering the overall tax rate.
trying to see if it was one of the scenarios that I did, yes. So, now this is without the loss factor because I just ran it pure. So, at prior year reassessment, it is what it is, and I mean, pre-reassessment. And so now, if we were to do that, it's $58.88 on let me get this right. We took a $400,000 house and we said the average reassessment was 11.7%. So we made it $446,800. So you're comparing yesterday, your house was $400,000 and you paid your bill. Tomorrow you pay it based on $446,000 at a 40 mills. And that equates to additional $58.88 if you don't take into the loss credit factor, which is based on sales tax. That's your increase
Is that,
Pre-reassessment, post-reassessment, same house reflecting the new value.
does that reflect the offset for the 1% local option sales tax, or does it get reduced from $58?
The overall bill would be reduced, so it doesn't account for that, because our loss factor was higher because we had some liability we needed to give back, and sales tax was doing better. So it kind of throws it off a bit. But this is, both amounts are pre-loss control, or lost sales tax credit factor. So the 58 is gonna be less, but not zero. I'm sorry, mathematically, your 400,000 has a .004 tax credit.
Yes.
The 446 has a .00028 because of the sales tax. So you would have gotten a little bit more credit before on a lower bill. You'll get a little less credit. You'll still get $100 and some credit. So I didn't run the delta between the two at that point.
Okay, and just to connect all the dots, whatever millage rate we set today, when do property owners get that tax bill and pay that tax?
It's due in January.
This coming January?
Yes, sir.
So it'll start applying now.
Yes, sir.
See, I was thinking it would be applied next year, and then the tax bill would be due the following year, the following January.
Each July, we start our budget year out predicated on a certain rate. It takes the county till September to get us the actual numbers to certify for that year's budget.
Right. Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke.
I just want to say a couple things. Reassessment actually is a good thing for us and for the people that live here, because what you just mentioned is that person who used to live in a $400,000 house is now living in a $446,000 house, and they didn't do anything. And I don't know what the percentages are of the other communities out there, but I'd be willing to bet Mount Pleasant's values increased at a higher percentage than some of the other communities. A. B, they just got $46,000 extra for living in a town that decides to do the right things to make this town great. And I think we need this money in order for us to continue to do great and to service our residents. If somebody has $46,000 extra, even though I'm just telling stories, I mean, they could walk down the bank tomorrow and do a home equity line to get the $18 extra it takes to pay this tax, to make that work. And I think they're getting something for what we're going to, if this passes, for what we're going to charge. It's not like we're just taking more money for us to buy more pens or pencils or anything else around here. There are projects we gotta do. And drainage. If we don't address that here, I think it's reckless, quite frankly. And I think that we've got to take some type of action today to do something. We're just negotiating what it's going to be, which I think is good. But I think the people that are going to be paying this, if they take a look at their assessment bill and see what the home they're living in now is worth compared to what it was worth, I think they're going to be pretty happy, I think. I know I am. So that's just a comment.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I want to call everybody's attention to what the Post and Courier has been doing for the last week, talking about the problems with flooding within the entire Charleston metropolitan area. And on Tuesday, there just happened to be a picture of Abundant Seafood and an owner going in there, standing in rising water. And that rising water makes it more critical for us to start making improvements to our drainage, because it exacerbates the drainage problem every year that the rising tide continues. So we have got to do something about that if we want to be living in a community that recognizes what is going on with the rising tides.
I'd like to call for the question.
Ms. Santos first, and then Ms. Whitley.
I had just one more. I liked Councilman Whitley's remarks about the referendum on recreation, and I would just like to see if you would include that in your motion.
Am I allowed to include that in my motion? It's not really on the agenda. No. I don't think, but Mr. Demora, can we please place that on the Recreation Committee agenda for October?
Assuming
Is
it's.
that all right with Mr.
Absolutely.
Comfortable with the
Santos?
chair.
Absolutely.
Okay, then,
Yes.
yes, it's on there.
Okay, good.
Was that it? Ms. Hyatt? Oh, Ms. Rambo.
Go ahead. Just one final comment. I mean, no matter how we try to present it, yes, it's a lower tax rate. But what this vote will do is raise people's taxes in the middle of a pandemic. And it's not right.
Let me ask a couple of questions. This is not a budget meeting, so we're not deciding what money gets spent by how much on what project. That's, as the chairman of the Finance Commission, that's a budget meeting. We're not doing that. When we put money into the debt millage, right? And then we have money that goes into the operating millage. How do we know for certain, or how do we assure the tax-paying public that that is what it is? We're talking drainage. I haven't heard bonding anything to fix swimming pools or anything. I've heard it for drainage. So what surety is there that what goes into the into the debt millage side gets used for what we think we're doing it for?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent question. Money captured on the debt millage side must be for capital. So in other words, let's just say the debt millage side, for purpose of example, was 4 mills. We couldn't then take a mill of that, if it was in the debt millage side, and move it to the operating side without you, council, changing the breakdown in the millage. Meaning, if it was at 4, now making it at 3, sending 1 over to operating. Without you doing that purposely, it can't move. It has to stay for capital.
Okay, and so that goes into a lockbox. In other words, when we get that money is sitting there in a debt service account, for better words?
In the fund.
In the fund.
It is, we actually send directly debt mills to a debt fund.
Right.
And then we have to abide by all the criteria that Mr. Demora said. Yes, sir. It sits there and it can be only used for capital. We can't suddenly go, oh, wait, we want to shift it else. It has to stay in that fund for those purposes.
Okay. I'll speak. What I had in mind before this motion was keeping the operating millage the same and increasing the debt millage by something less than the 5.3. For one, a lot of our citizens, or most of our citizens, are benefiting from rising property values. The ones who aren't are the ones who are experiencing flooding. So I could justify capturing a little bit of this increase to go ahead and bond and fix our major flooding issues where those residents are actually doing worse in terms of appreciation, or potentially, at least in the free market side. I don't know about the tax assessment side, because they would have flooding issues, whether it's nuisance flooding or flooding on their property or whatever. I think the 5.3 is a little bit much. I'm with Mr. Rambo on that, in that we're taking too big of a bite in the middle of a pandemic. And if we can lower that a little bit, I know I can support it. So I guess I would have to offer an amendment to the motion, Mr. Pagliarini. Yes, sir. Presuming the chair can do that. Yes, sir. I would like to amend. Let me find the math here. Hang on just a second. If we are, before I do the thing, I was thinking that if we roll back, hold on just a second. revenue neutral would put us at 37.6 mils. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And 34.7 of that is operating and 2.9 of that is debt. What I would like to do is do the debt millage, take that up 1.5 mils, 2.9 and 1.5, 9 and 5 is 14. Is that right? So instead of that being 0.053, 0.0053, what does that come out? 0.00444, is that right?
Yes, sir. 0.0044.
What I was trying to get to is rolling back, if we roll back completely, we'd be at 37.6, right?
Yes, sir.
I was trying to get to 35 and a half combined. Would somebody do the math
But
on that?
that's lowering it further. 35 and a half is lower than 37.6.
So, all right, so if we roll back your motion is rolling back the operating mills to 34.7, right, if we use that. That gives us a total of 40.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is get us a total of, instead of 5.3 mils for debt service, to get us to, what did I say? Add 1.5 to the 2.9.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And so doing the math here, I've got, without my calculator, 4.4 debt mills, and then your 34.7 operating for a total of 39.1?
39.1.
So that puts the debt at
0.0044.
4.4 instead of 5.3. My point is, I'm not sure why we're capturing so much more on the debt millage when we think that 1 mil under the new assessment rate is about 800, probably a little more, wouldn't you say, Mr. Moore? Maybe a little more than 800. If it was 800 under the old assessment, wouldn't 1 mil be more than 800 under the higher?
The difference, Mayor, is that we expect a lower collection rate,
Based on,
the economy, the times.
okay, right.
But
Which kind of reiterates the point that if what I'm trying to get at, whatever my number comes to, is that we have to fix drainage because we are adversely affecting people's property values if we don't. Everything else is a wish list. I view that as a necessity. And I am trying to get it to where we are rolling the operating back to revenue neutral, and we're only doing exactly what we need to do to fix that drainage right now. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I haven't made a motion yet, but you have the floor, Ms. Wheeler.
Well, I think that's a noble goal, and I agree with it, but I think that bringing us to the 0.0053 enables flexibility with that, because if we want to just achieve, do we want to achieve one drainage project, or do we want to achieve multiple drainage projects over time? Like, is there, and also the practice of moving our operating expenses to pay off our debt is something we shouldn't be doing. That says to me that this balance is off, and that we need to fix that. This is, I think, the only opportunity that we're going to have to do this because of the reassessment. It's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 2 years. We also look, and when you look at our overall millage rate, if we drop it to 0.04 or 40, our millage rate compared to other municipalities is less than half of, I think, every single municipality in our region. I mean, I think it's like 130 something in North Charleston. What is it? I mean, do you have the data?
We have that. It's 90-something mills in Charleston.
90-something mills in Charleston. So, and $18 a mill, I understand that we are in a very different economic time. But $18 over a year is not that much. I just think if we don't do this now, if we don't shift this balance now, do we want to be a town that's just keeping the lights on and barely hanging on? And this is good. We're kicking the can down the road where our operating expenses and inflation, I mean, there's inflation and, operating expenses are going up. We are setting ourselves up for heartache in 3 to 5 years. Whereas if we do this now, I think that we're pushing that problem further down, making it a 10-year problem rather than a 5-year problem.
Well, let me ask you this. Under your motion, the operating millage is the same,
Yes.
but
we
it'll be
don't-
on a higher valuation, right? So operating will have more money to operate with, right? 34.7 mils under the new assessment.
No, it's revenue neutral. 0.0347 keeps operating revenue neutral. Increasing the debt millage means that we're not moving money over from operating to cover the debt.
Okay, well, that was my question. If under the old revenue, under the old assessment, we had 3 million a year, 2.1 from general, and we were operating and we were moving that over to debt, then we won't be doing that anymore because we just upped debt to 5.3 mils. So in effect, it's a 2.1 million windfall for our general operating. And that's what I'm not comfortable with.
Well, I think that what it's doing is shifting that over to the debt millage, enabling the building of capital projects. Is that correct? The increase in millage there? For the debt millage, it goes towards capital projects.
It entirely depends what council
budget.
decides to spend it on. If
Yeah.
it's, it depends whether you do projects on it or not, or allow it to pay for debt service, is how much money ends up getting freed up in the operating side of the general fund.
I see.
So my point is, if under the old rate, we had 2.1 million from the general fund to shift over to debt. Now we're not going to need to shift that, but we're doing revenue neutral. We are in effect increasing our operating by $2.1 million because we're making up for that in the debt. At least part of that is existing and part of that will be new if we bond.
Yes, sir. In the very bottom scenario with the .0062, that's the one that kind of fully funds the 2.1 million. At the scenario that Ms. Whitley did at .0053, it doesn't fully fund that 2.1. It is an increase, or it's an amount that the operating fund does not need to transfer over, but it's not the full 2.1. It's a mil less. So it's only 100.
So in a sense, we could reduce the operating millage from the 3.47 that's in the motion and still have a revenue neutral. We would still have the same amount of money to operate with because we're not transferring it over to debt, right?
No. If we lower the overall millage rate, the overall money coming in is less.
But what I'm saying is it didn't need 2.1 million of that because it was going from operating to debt, and now we're beefing up the debt, which is the right thing to do. But we're leaving that in operating, so in effect, I think we are reaping somewhat of a windfall.
I don't view it as a windfall. I view it as the town is changing. The town is being reassessed. The values are going up. I think Mr. O'Rourke put it best. Mr. O'Rourke, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I think you're both right, okay? But each year, the budget is a new document. And each year, this council gets to decide what projects are taken on, what projects are not taken on. What these two people have to do is figure out how to make it work. So when we say we want to have this, we want to have that, then they'll come to us and say, the only way to do it is if you can move this money from operating over here to capital for us to do it. So I think the mayor is correct in saying what he said based on last year's budget. But as I said before, I believe there is a long list of capital projects that the community needs that we could justify. What's going on right now that I actually like, I think it's good. We're having adult discussion, which will end in compromise, which is the way government's supposed to work. You're saying 4.0, mayor's saying a different number. I think we should try to look at something maybe in between or giving a little bit each way. A win today is when we all walk out of here thinking, darn it, I didn't kind of get what I want. A little bit each way. So I think that The purpose of today's meeting is to set the millage rate. Good points made by every single person that's opened their mouth. We just have to negotiate on what that number's going to be right now, I think. And then when we do the budget, look, even though we're shifting things and freeing up that budget money, who knows? Mr. Santos may win an argument, and we may be building parks all over the place, and we're going to need money from operating to do that. So I think today is setting the millage rate. It appears as if there's an appetite to get a little room here. You've got one thing that I seconded, but here's what I don't want to happen today. I don't want for us to have our motion that I seconded, and then that fail, and then something else fails, and we leave here with nothing. We've got to have something, I think, before we leave here, and I think the best way to do that is with some compromise, I think.
I just did some math. $2.1 million, if 1 mil is $800,000, that's 2.6 mils. So there were 2.6 mils in our general operating budget that we did not need or use for operating funds that we were able to move over and use for debt. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're making up for that debt by increasing the debt millage from 2.9 to 5.3 to do things we have to do for the benefit of our citizens. I'll be much more comfortable if we will reduce the operating millage, maybe not all the 2.6 mils, but like Tom said, maybe we can compromise on something, because otherwise what we're doing is we're going to have more operating money by design, by a permanent tax change in a pandemic.
How about this? How about reducing it to 0.034 and then leaving the debt millage 0.0053? Then that puts us a total of 39.3. So that's down from 41 to 39.3.
Hang on just a second.
And so that's kind of a compromise position between you and me.
Okay, if we took the 34.7 mils that's in the operating, that's in the motion, and we took the whole 2.6 mils out that we were, let's say that's 2.6 is what we put into the debt millage, right?
Well, so we would,
We would be at 32.1
no, we didn't put 2.6.
for operating instead of 34.7. That would be the whole thing.
But then that would take us below, wouldn't that take us below revenue neutral?
Well, what I'm saying is revenue neutral included 2.6 mils that we were automatically putting towards debt.
No, revenue neutral is 0.0376. That's revenue, 37.6 mils is revenue neutral. I'm proposing 39.1.
No, I'm just looking at operating. And what I'm saying is your motion keeps operating the same. So in
No,
other words, we're increasing the debt millage from 2.9 to 5.3 so we can cover that, but we're leaving 2.6 mils in operating that were not being used for operating anyway. They were being used for debt service. So we're really doubling what we're saying we're doing for debt service.
Can I?
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes perfect mathematical sense. If we had a flip chart, it would look good. What I'm seeing is the realities of budgets in a government. And when I think it's dangerous to decrease operating millage. I think it's dangerous to decrease any millage. But operating millage is tough because we're going to be sitting in the budget meeting and Mr. Chapman's going to want 2 guys to dig ditches in the old village. And that's going to be salaries and this and things that we need operating money for. I mentioned a list of capital projects that you could probably give us. I'll bet you there's a list of operational things you may be able to give us as well. And then it's the unknown. We sat here this year when we decided, let's put an officer in every single school. Holy heck, how much did that cost? And where'd that money come from? Didn't come out of the sky. And I don't know what it's going to be, but next year there's going to be another one of those things that we just don't know what they are right now. And I think that we have semantics, and it's okay. But at the end, I'm thinking about what's the main number going to be, as opposed to how it's split. I think you're right, Mayor, in the math on But to say, since we did it in this 1 year's budget, that we no longer need that money, I think is not accurate. So I would be for a compromise in the total, not decreasing any millage, and the increase going into the debt.
So maybe reduce the debt to like 0.005.
Would you say 3.91?
So
Total?
39.3.
Okay, well, 39.3, and yes.
So that would reduce,
But, you know, to Mayor's point, leave the,
From 40,
From
41 down
41.
to 39.3? Okay.
41 minus 39.3 is 1.7. So then that would take, so let me do this math. Point. So 0.0046. So the debt millage would go up to 0.0046 instead of 0.0053. And the operating millage would stay the same per Mr. O'Rourke's.
.0046,
Yes, and that would be enough to cover the basin in the old village.
and the
That's correct.
total becomes what?
The total becomes 39.3.
39.3.
So I'm willing to amend my motion. So I will amend my motion
All right,
to be a debt mills to support debt of an operating millage of 0.0347
and debts
and a debt of 0.0046,
for a total of
total of
39.
39.3.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. We're now in discussion.
Ready to vote?
I just want to make sure that we're going with the revenue neutral number on operations. We're only increasing on the debt, the debt millage, because we have to fix things that protects our residents' property values.
absolutely.
The other thing it does is it will save money for this town, because as the chair of the statewide floodwater task force said right there, if we don't have a plan and a means of financing for debt, our bond rating will drop and insurance rates will go up, and that will cost our residents more money. And it's pouring rain outside as we speak. So the only reason I would support this is because that's what we're doing. That's not fluff and puff. And I'm sorry to the department heads in here, it doesn't give y'all any new, but I agree with Mr. Rambo. These are tough times, but we didn't choose to inherit drainage problems that we have to fix, but we have to fix those. And I had 2 residents in the last 10 days, totally unscripted, contacted me because they have flooding issues at their house, and Ms. Chapman and I discussed this for the Flood Resilience Committee. They want the town to consider buying their property or getting grants to buy their property so it can be turned into retention,
Yes,
because they're going to have trouble selling it on the free market.
that's coming. That's
So
coming.
I'm all about fixing flooding. Otherwise, I don't like messing with tax rates. But we have no choice when it comes to flooding. So we had a motion and a second. So that is now 39.3 mils, which is an overall drop from 41. Yes, sir, Ms. Chapman.
Mayor, in doing that 39.3, and I think for debt service, that number becomes 0.0046. How much can we then take from the debt service that we already have in operations into that number? Does that give us, 0.25? Does it give us, how much does that give us out of,
Yes, sir.
1.7 mils.
I think it's a little less than that. If the base was 2.9, if 1 mil is being captured for stormwater, that's 3.9. So then the increment is between the 4.6 and the 3.9. So it's,
0.5.
yeah, it's about, so with 800,000 being the number, it's 400,000 or so.
so we are doing some of what Councilmember Whitley suggested. We're just not doing the whole thing, and we're doing better accounting and budgeting by doing that.
Yes.
We're just not getting the whole thing today.
Right.
So it's a good compromise, I think.
And if our economy were booming like pre-COVID, we would go ahead and do this and bond and fix both basins, but I don't think we can be that I'm not going to use the term greedy, that ambitious,
Right.
that ambitious in
Right.
this economy.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I mean, you mentioned the economy. I've never read an economic article that suggests raising people's taxes in the middle of a downturn. And it just doesn't make any sense. I know I've said that.
Let me respond to that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, you have the floor.
As I suggested, we bill our residents every year, right now, $60 a year for drainage, for stormwater. If we are going to do that study, which I believe we have suggested, there may be a revenue neutral by what we did and what the revisions are for the $450,000 house owner. So instead of being 18 or whatever number you want to pick, the 58, it may end up being revenue neutral for next year's taxes. So I'm not about suggesting that we're raising taxes completely. We may be lowering taxes, actually, if we do this tiered approach for storm drainage. And the storm drainage, for everybody's benefit, is technically not something you can take off your taxes like taxes are. Taxes, you can reduce your overall income tax with what you pay in taxes, but your stormwater fee is a fee. It's not a tax, so you cannot reduce your income tax payments with that. So if I'm getting a reduction in that, I would be very happy. Even more so than a small $18 reduction in my taxes. And I call for the question, Mayor.
We can do that if no one else desires to be recognized without a vote. Okay, so we have the motion that would put the operations millage at 34.7, which is the revenue neutral number, the debt at 4.6 mils for a total of 39.3 mils, which is, I believe, if the math is right on this, less than 2 mils total of what would be totally revenue neutral, if I'm reading the top line right.
Yes.
This goes into effect immediately, is reflected in the outgoing property tax bills?
Yes.
Is that correct? All right, we have had a motion, had a second.
I request a roll call, please.
Yes, we will. And a yes vote is to approve, and a no vote is not to approve. Would the clerk please call the roll? And obviously, we're 2 people short, so a majority is 4, so there's 7 people voting, all right?
Ms. Corley is absent. Ms. Hyatt?
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing is absent. Mr. O'Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mr. Rambo?
No.
Mr. Rambo votes no. Mr. Santos?
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley?
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Mayor Haney?
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
By a 5-2 vote, the millage rate is set at 39.3.
Oh, and then we need to do the sales credit tax factor. I move that we approve the recommended sales credit tax factor at .00028.
Second.
0.00028. We have a motion and a second. Hang on just a second. Let me get my writing done.
I just have a quick question on
Yes,
that.
sir.
Ms. Kurzweil, can you please go back to that slide? I don't know if you have it. And I apologize if you said this, but where did that revenue projection come in? It seems to me like sales tax would actually be lower than that. I don't know.
So we actually we have adjusted our projection. In the budget, we were sitting at more like 6.8 million. Is what we
Where does that
anticipated.
projection come from?
This one is one we trend, and then, because we don't get any better data until we get it. The state takes it in their collection of the sales tax piece, they give back a certain portion to municipalities, and then it's allocated up in different ways. So we go ahead and trend based on what we overall believe is gonna be our it's a trend analysis is what happens. So we are trending it down 2%.
And this, so by 20/2021, you mean fiscal year 2021 that just started July 1? Is that
Yes,
what you
sir.
mean? Okay.
Yes, sir. And so the money that was collected in July for sales tax is remitted in August, and we just received it in September, our first look at July. And July is trending just over 2% below the prior July, which to us looks very good because last July was a whole different world. And so
Yeah.
we believe that this is good, a good analysis. We think it
Okay.
might come in a little higher, then we'll give it back.
Okay, you're good. I wasn't sure where that number came from. That's what.
Did I understand you that the sales tax collection is only 2% lower than it was a year ago?
On this portion of it, the other portion is actually only 0.65% less than last July. So those were good things to see. We just got them. So,
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Kotov, you ask an excellent point. The portion that's been discussed is the one that helps homeowners.
Right.
But the one that affects the town of Mount Pleasant is that last number that you mentioned, which was what again? That's a key number.
right, it's only 0.65% or just over half
Half
a
a
percent
percent.
down from last year.
It's remarkable, yeah.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I would have thought it'd been way worse.
I would not have guessed that. All right, so we have the motion, we have a second to set the sales tax credit factor at make sure I get this right, 0.00028. I feel like I'm looking at my college grades. Which side of the decimal? Is there any other discussion? We'll do this by roll call as well. A yes vote is to approve.
Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing is absent. Mr. O'Rourke.
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley is absent. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
So by unanimous vote, the sales tax credit factor is set. There's nothing else on our agenda other to adjourn. Is there anything else to come before this body? If not, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.